Hi, I'm Reverend Grace, and we're here today with Earl Schneider, and we're going to be talking about consciousness. I am a Akashic Record reader, which is where you use your consciousness to read the energies of another person or anything that's created has been recorded in the heavens, so to speak. And it's like a grand library, and I can use my consciousness and access the information. I have been doing Akashic Record readings for a while now, and you'll be able to see those now on Akako TV at Channel 52. And so we have learned that our thoughts create our consciousness, and our consciousness creates geometric patterns, and geometric patterns create vibrations and frequencies, and those vibrations and frequencies create sound and shape and form. So Earl's going to share with us today how it affects like water and energy, and our consciousness can affect water and also other aspects. So I'm going to turn it over to Earl Schneider.
And thank you. And my name is Earl Schneider, and I am a former member of the technical staff at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins. This is a picture of me. Can you zoom in on that? And where are we?
That's a picture of you when you worked at Johns Hopkins?
This is a picture of me when I was at the Applied Physics Lab. It's my passport. It's the only picture I have from the past due to my exciting adventures in between. Mm-hmm. So if you could see that, we can't see it very well here. I don't know.
But that's
Peter.
Okay, they can see it. So, okay, so continue. You wanted to share something about water, something that happened to you?
We were on vacation in the Virgin Islands and had a number of exciting adventures on large sailing boats. And one evening, I asked if anyone wanted to go down and rent a small 20-foot planing sailboat, which is a boat without an engine, and it has a little dagger board to keep it from flipping over. But it's called a planing boat because it jumps up on top of the waves and goes really fast. So I invited the people who were on our tour to come, and that included a little one-year-old baby and mom and 3 other ladies and a couple of guys, and who had incidentally never been out on a sailboat that small. So despite the fact that we just come in from sailing for a month in a larger sailboat, this was quite another adventure. So it was toward the end of the afternoon, and we all went out in it, and they were in the cabin and looking out at me and a bit concerned, and I could see that as we went out into the bay behind the marina, that the weather was a little bit more than I had thought. So we sailed rather quickly out into the middle of a very rough sea. And so no one was really comfortable with the sailing. So we decided to turn around and go back to the harbor. Well, when I did come about and head for the harbor, I noticed there were no markers to indicate where that harbor mouth was that we could go into. So we kept sailing back, and as we approached the rocks and the cliff and so forth, it was about maybe a 20-foot cliff or 15-foot or something like that, and rocks. I decided that because we knew that the area was not one we wanted to experiment in with sailing around in a little boat, there were a lot of reefs and sharks. And so we continued heading toward the cliff, and I told the people that we were going to kind of hold the boat in a pattern, letting the waves slip under us, and we will wait for the large wave that would be building, that some people call the 9th wave. And this wave is a function of all the waves building on one another until finally you get to the point where there is a giant wave, and in this case it was about a 35-foot wave. And as it approached, you could hear it. It was like a roaring sound, and as it approached, I was giving the people in the cabin a step-by-step and thing, and I told them that we were going to rise up, and be deposited on the other side of the rocks. And so, sure enough, as got very close to shore, you could actually see the bottom of the bay as the water was drawn up into this giant wave. As it happened, we were pulled right down into the lip of the wave, and we just simply were deposited into the harbor swamp area. I told my friend to grab the centerboard and pull it up so that we wouldn't get stuck in the swamp there. And we drifted on over, tied up where we had left. The owners were in their power boat. They went sideways in the channel with their mouths open at this peculiar event of us arriving back, like less than a half hour since we left. We were suddenly deposited back on this giant wave. We didn't communicate with them. It just went on.
So are you saying that you're almost like the prayers that you had in your heart, you're like praying because you weren't sure you were going to get back? Or?
I had no fear whatsoever.
Okay.
I was simply in this environment and I felt the weather. I felt completely natural in it. I'm not a professional sailor, but I've been, I'm from the Chesapeake Bay, and I've been through all kinds of little emergencies in small boats and stuff. So, but no, this was quite different. I felt very simple. I could see the whole process that I was describing to them, the stacking of the waves, and I could hear it occurring. However, in the back of my mind was a little voice saying, well, this has never happened before here. This is not a regular event. Big waves do not come crashing over this little cliff. We are in the Virgin Islands.
So it was almost like a miracle, almost like, or someone was, or something, some force was guiding you and watching over you.
Exactly.
Almost like a miracle.
And I had no sensation of it. I was just simply there, operating, the boat, and in my mind, the vision of the waves building and so forth was just that. It was a vision that I was having that would deliver us from this very bizarre, scary situation. But I felt no fear at any time. I was only curious that the people in the boat, in the cabin that I had taken with me, were so fearful.
True. Yeah.
So, but anyway, once we pulled up to the dock and we all disembarked, got out of the boat, got into our rent-a-car, and we waved. I waved. The people were still in a mild state of shock, I would have to say.
I would be that could have been a death situation.
We
you
would
could have
definitely
died.
have
You could have,
died.
your boat could
There's
have
no
just broken up on the rocks. You could have drowned. You could have been battered on the rocks.
Right.
It was almost like God's consciousness or Christ's consciousness or whatever, your angel guides were watching over you and created this miracle event, and you had no fear because your inner being knew you were going to be all right, and they gave you that vision of what's going to happen to keep you calm so that you could work the boat as it should have been. That's awesome.
It was just like that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that had to do with water and the power of water, but mostly to do with the power that we have if we are not afraid.
Right, no fear.
So the no fear aspect is an elemental prerequisite, I would say.
I think definitely that we are never alone, that we are guided in our lives and protected sometimes too. And I think in that situation you were protected and guided by higher beings or even your higher self. So that consciousness had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I know also we're beings of energy, beings of light, and we have DNA, and that holds our memories and our knowledge, ancient knowledge. And not only does it transmute or transforms physical characteristics, it also changes our predispositions, time, energy, matter, space, all of that has to work for the DNA. So perhaps even some of your DNA memories or knowledge from ancient lives could have been working in that as well. Yeah.
Well, it was such a solid feeling.
Yeah.
There was no doubt.
That's incredible.
And it just went like that.
So you had another story you wanted to share with us about Was it
the teleportation adventure.
the one? What was it you were putting up on the mountain?
Well, we had had an adventure, a flying saucer. We were sitting on. Shall I tell that about the?
Yes,
We
please.
were on my house was in Fairfax, California.
Okay.
It was up on the side of a hill facing Mount Tamalpais, and on the other side of that was the city of San Francisco.
Okay.
We were experimenting with health food. We were open. There was a health food store that we were supporting and opening there in Fairfax.
Okay.
And so we had finished this new meatless dinner,
Okay.
and we're out on the balcony. The last person to arrive was my girlfriend. She was going to come through the French doors at the far end of the balcony, and as she did, she let out this very peculiar little squeaking sound, which we all looked over to see what was going on. And she was there, and she was pointing at this brilliantly lit UFO that was coming around the edge of the hill that we were on at our altitude. It was moving about 5 miles an hour, and it was lit up by itself. There was an aura around it. It was, as I said, moving about 5 miles an hour, and the aura around it was a very distinct pale spring green on the inside of the aura and a pale purple on the outside, so that it was kind of a sandwich aura around the craft, and it moved without any sound at all as it came up to our balcony. And it got about maybe 50 yards away, and it began a slow bank that showed us the bottom of the craft and the reflection of the town of Fairfax perfectly imaged in the bottom of the craft, like a mirror.
Wow.
And it moved, and all of a sudden, as it was right in front of us, it accelerated to, I assume, was close to the speed of light, because it turned into a giant gold arc that went into over Mount Tamalpais and became a bright star that disappeared.
Wow.
And
Did
it
you ever,
made no sound.
did you ever get to see the occupants in the
No,
craft?
we could see inside. There were portholes around it was about a 36-foot in diameter disc,
Okay.
and a raised canopy for the cockpit, and with little portholes around it.
I've seen pictures of UFOs like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this was apparently a typical scout craft that are around. I would say that a couple of days before, we had bought this powerful telescope, and we're setting it up on the deck, and there was a bright object in the sky. And so just because it was something to see in the late afternoon, I focused the telescope on it. But we were missing a part of the eyepiece.
Oh.
And so we were looking around for it, and we finally, of course, we found it. And I went back to the telescope, and I screwed the eyepiece in, and then there came the image of what we had focused on. Well, there's something wrong about this, because we focused on something that was in space, and when several minutes later we went back, it was still focused on that image. Well, there's something called the movement of the Earth, or something is moving. I mean, so if
It's almost as if the UFO wanted you to see it.
well, indeed, it was in a stationary orbit,
Yeah.
and it was fixed right over the city of San Francisco.
So it was always almost kind of
and
moving with
it was moving with it. So whenever, I'm an engineer, so, you see a phenomenon like that, you go, whoa, what's going on here? And you realize a whole bunch of stuff immediately. The first thing you realize is it's not a star, it's not something off the planet, it's right here, it's very bright, and now we can look at it. What it was it looked like a cigar-shaped vehicle.
Okay.
And it was obviously very large, and coming out of the end of it were these little bright dots, which we finally realized were flying saucers, that
Okay.
it was kind of shooting them out into the atmosphere, and they were zooming off to other places. Anyway, that's what started this whole adventure, was seeing that. So And
So you saw that before you saw the UFO close up to your house?
no, we saw that after we had that experience,
Okay.
and went and bought this powerful telescope, which could be compacted into a case that we could put on our motorcycle. So, and we had a bunch of new motorcycles and that we could move around.
How did you guys feel when you saw all that?
Well, I was trying to explain to the people who were present what it was, but they were having a lot of difficulty with something in orbit and the realization that you could tell that it was in a stationary orbit because it hadn't moved. Well, they have a thing called a star drive. It's a little motor that tracks things that are in orbit or that are, moving.
As an engineer working as you did you have experiences with UFOs or tracking UFOs or any of that while you were working?
I saw my first unusual thing in the air when I was in the occupation forces in Europe, in Germany, in 1953.
Wow, I wasn't even born then.
Well, we were coming back from the city of Metz. We had gone there because there was a Canadian Air Force base there, and there were Canadian Air Force girls there. So anyway, we were coming back, and it was a late Sunday afternoon, and in Europe, or in France and Germany that I'd been in, Sunday afternoon, people just go out into their environment and walk around in nature, and there's just people walking around everywhere. Well, as we drove along, we kept noticing that the people were out, but they're all staring up into the sky. Well, after a while, even we noticed that there was something unusual going on. We pulled over. There was a gigantic silver balloon or disc or something. We couldn't quite tell what in the sky. And we watched it for the maybe 50 miles all the way back to Nancy, where our air base was. We watched it all the way back, and people all along the way were watching
Did
it.
the military say what it was, or didn't
Well,
talk
we
about
thought
it?
we'd get an answer, but as soon as we got back, the guards looked at us and said, "Don't even ask."
Well, they said NASA says not a straight answer. NASA means not a straight answer.
Turns out. Yeah.
Most of the military, keeps clamps. I was in Arizona at the time that they had the Phoenix Lights.
Oh, indeed.
And I'm actually in the very first CD that came out. They interviewed us talking about experiences with the Phoenix Lights. So it was pretty,
Amazing.
it was amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that went on with that and all the denial at first, deny.
Right, right.
And even with Mayor Smithington or whatever his name was, at first he made fun
Yeah,
of
with that
the people
monster.
and then he changed his story afterwards, because he got so much heat from everybody, because there
Yeah.
was reputable people who saw it. I mean, there's
Right,
police
everyone
officers.
saw it.
Yeah, everyone saw it. There was politicians who saw it, and, police officers who saw it, firemen who saw it. And so, to make fun of the lady who called it in and reported it,
Definitely not
yeah, it
cool.
was not cool, yeah. But they've had so much documentation now with it, and they've gone around with all the films of it. It wasn't, military flares. They've proved that false.
Right.
They've actually done scientific tests on
With
the lights.
flares and
yeah,
everything.
that
Yeah, I
it
know
was
that.
not. Yeah.
There was a
so now we
History
know.
Channel
Yeah.
expose
Of that, yeah.
Of that.
Yeah, and it actually showed up twice because I was there in 2003 and it showed up again. It
Right,
actually flowed
right.
down over. They had to close down the airport, and it flowed over the airport down to like Tucson, then turned around and came back and then disappeared over the mountains.
Right.
So it was really cool. And I've seen other
Indeed.
UFOs there while living in Arizona as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there's actually a UFO base that the military there's some mountains over there.
Flagstaff?
Yeah, right outside Phoenix. There's some mystery mountains, and there's actual UFO base in those mountains.
I'm not
And
surprised.
one time I was living on a certain street, and all the military trucks and stuff were going right past mine. I mean, and they flew helicopters over, and they're all heading to that UFO
Area.
base.
Yeah.
To do something they're not telling the people about, but it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
It's
yeah.
pretty extraordinary, even back in the 50s, the way they were so obnoxious about anybody
Yeah.
reporting stuff.
Well, have you heard anything on like Dr. Stephen Greer is doing a disclosure project trying to get the information about all the UFOs and extraterrestrials that have been here ever since time began.
Yeah.
He's trying to get that information out. They actually had 200 witnesses come out in 2001 in front of Congress and everything. And actually, you can go on YouTube and Google Dr. Stephen Greer and Disclosure Project and hear all about it.
Right.
He has books out. It's awesome reading. And I, in the future, I plan on doing a show. I'll show the different kinds of extraterrestrials we have here, how long they've been here, and all of that will come out in that lecture in the future. So stay tuned to Akaku TV. In the near future, we're going to discuss some awesome things like crystal skulls and pyramids and UFOs and 2012, the Mayan calendar, because this is all affecting us right now. We're
Totally.
in it, what they call the shift of the
Once you
ages.
begin to realize
Yeah.
that it's not only affecting us, but we are affecting it as well.
As well, yes.
And as it goes along, in the evolution of consciousness, and my own, I've noticed the different stages, and finally coming to the point where, you know, I have a natural bent for testing stuff, and so I've always tested my sensitivity to awareness and to consciousness and to our ability to do different things, and have, you know, had practically no success doing magic that way. However, behind it all are the magical things that have actually occurred to me. Now, this one event, after we finished this experiencing this UFO, you know, which didn't even talk to us, just flew away.
Rude.
So, well, yes. And so anyway, we got the telescope and we formulated this plan to get all of our guys on motorcycles and to go up into the water district above Fairfax, and on the way to Bolinas, which is on the coast of California. Anyway, so we got it all together, and on this dark of the moon night, we all drove up after dark, around 8 in the evening, to go to this special place and set up our telescope to look for UFOs. So we got up there, and there was a Volkswagen van parked right where we thought we wanted to be, and I thought, oh no, the alternative spot was across the road, but up a little embankment. So it meant that we had to go up a little embankment, which was, you know, pretty much nothing.
Yeah.
However, it was very dark, and we didn't want to turn our headlights back on once we had realized that we were going to have to move. So I had the telescope on the back of my bike, and my bike was a BSA, a British bike, and it had been extended 18 inches, so it had a wide turning radius. And so I said, well, I'm going to just like jump up there, and we're not going to turn our lights on or anything, and then we'll proceed from there. So I'm going to start the motor up, and we made this big wide thing. Well, in this process of lining the bike up with what we thought was a little path up the embankment, we were using starlight. Well, there was confusion about where the path was. Well, at some point I decided, well, this is the path. So I just gunned it, and I went random flying it through the air, and the next thing I knew, I was in space, and I had driven off the cliff.
Oh my God.
And I looked down between my legs, and I could see the little stream way down the tops of the giant pine trees.
And you're in the
And
air.
I'm in the air. My motorcycle is, and
Evil
all of a
people.
sudden I see inside, time stops. Okay, I see a pear-shaped silver object inside of my body, slowly going down. I was a weight and balance engineer at one point. One of my jobs was I had 2 satellites that I was in charge of, and I had to make sure I knew where our center of gravity was in the craft. That's a standard procedure for everything that you shoot into anywhere. And so
You see this light.
I knew about center of gravity. And so as I saw this thing, I thought it's going to